Everyone knows the names Hiroshima and Nagasaki, two cities that became eternal symbols of unimaginable destruction. Their names echo through history, taught in schools, whispered in memorials, printed in every textbook that speaks of the atomic age. But what almost no one remembers is this: there was supposed to be a third atomic bomb, already built, already scheduled, already waiting to be dropped. And if history had shifted by just one night, it would have fallen on Japan on August 19, 1945. This isn't just a story about a bomb. It's about chaos, secrecy, and a single night that decided whether millions would live or die. It's the story of how the modern world came within hours of witnessing one final act of destruction. An act that could have changed the course of history forever. August 1945. World War II in Europe is over. Germany has surrendered. Hitler is dead, Mussolini executed. The swastikas that once shadowed Europe now lie trampled in the dust. But across the vast Pacific Ocean, the war is still raging. Japan, though cornered and bombed relentlessly, refuses to yield. For over 3 years, the Pacific Campaign has been a nightmare of unimaginable brutality. From the jungles of the Philippines to the black volcanic sands of Iwo Jima, every island battle has been soaked in blood. American soldiers watched civilians leap off cliffs rather than surrender. Mothers clutched their children and jumped into the sea to avoid capture. It wasn't just soldiers fighting. It was an entire nation consumed by the idea that death was honor, surrender was shame. Japan's military had even prepared a final plan, known ominously as the glorious death of 100 million. If the Americans invaded, every man, woman, and child would fight to the last breath. And that invasion was coming. It had a name: Operation Downfall. The largest amphibious assault in human history. More than 5 million Allied troops were preparing to storm Japan's home islands. The estimated casualties were staggering: at least 1 million Allied soldiers and up to 10 million Japanese. For the American leadership, this was unthinkable. They needed a faster way to end the war. And so, they turned to something new. A weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen. August 6, 1945. A silver B-29 bomber named Enola Gay lifts off from Tinian Island in the Pacific. Its cargo a single bomb codenamed Little Boy. At exactly 18:15 a.m., over the city of Hiroshima, a flash brighter than the sun splits the sky. In an instant, a fireball thousands of degrees hot engulfs the city. Concrete melts. Shadows burn into walls. People vanish where they stand, leaving only outlines on the pavement. 70,000 die instantly. Tens of thousands more succumb to burns and radiation in the days that follow. Inside Tokyo's war cabinet, disbelief fills the air. Many leaders cannot accept what has happened. Some claim it's an exaggeration. Others insist the Americans can't possibly have another bomb. They tell themselves, it must be a bluff. 3 days later, August 9th, a second B-29 boxcar takes off. This time carrying a new weapon, Fat Man. Its original target, the city of Kokura, is covered in clouds. So the plane turns toward its secondary target, Nagasaki. At 11:02 a.m., the second atomic bomb explodes. 40,000 people die within seconds. The city vanishes into a column of smoke and ash. And yet, Japan still does not surrender. Inside the imperial government, one question divides the nation: what will happen to Emperor Hirohito? For centuries, Japan's emperor was not just a ruler. He was believed to be divine. To surrender would mean admitting that even their god had failed. The Allies' Potsdam Declaration demanded unconditional surrender, with no guarantees for the emperor's throne. Half of Japan's cabinet refused. They wanted to keep fighting, no matter the cost. The other half, exhausted and broken, begged the emperor to save what remained of their nation. Then, on August 9th, just hours before the Nagasaki bombing, a new nightmare began. At 4 a.m., the Soviet Union declared war on Japan. Over 1 million Soviet troops poured into Manchuria, crushing Japanese forces in days. Now Japan faced annihilation from both sides, atomic fire from the west, and a red tide from the north. But across the Pacific, preparations for a third atomic strike were already underway. Major General Leslie Groves, head of the Manhattan Project, ordered another bomb assembled. Another Fat Man-type weapon. It was nearly ready. The plan to drop it by August 19, 1945. The target list included Kokura once again, the same city that had been spared by clouds days earlier. Aircrews were on standby. Planes were fueled. Orders were written. President Harry Truman, though uneasy, had made his stance clear. We shall continue to use it until we have completely destroyed Japan's power to make war. The third bomb was real. The plan was real. And the countdown had already begun. Tokyo, August 14, 1945. The night before Japan's surrender announcement. Inside the imperial palace, Emperor Hirohito had made a secret decision. He told his advisors, "I swallow my tears and give my sanction to accept the Allied proclamation." Japan would surrender, but the news wasn't supposed to be revealed until the next day. After his voice was recorded and broadcast nationwide. Yet not everyone agreed. In the shadows, a group of young army officers refused to accept defeat. Their leader was Major Kenji Hatanaka, a passionate, idealistic officer convinced that surrender would destroy Japan's honor. His mission: seize the imperial palace, destroy the surrender recording, and keep the war going. At 9:30 p.m., tanks rolled toward the palace gates. Gunfire echoed through the dark. Hatanaka confronted the commander of the Imperial Guard and murdered him when he refused to cooperate. The coup had begun. Soldiers stormed the palace halls, searching room by room. Somewhere inside was the vinyl record, the emperor's surrender speech, already recorded earlier that day. If they destroyed it before dawn, Japan would fight on. But the record was gone. Loyal servants had hidden it inside a pile of laundry. Outside, chaos reigned. Phone lines were cut. Tokyo went dark. Rumors spread across the city. "The emperor has been captured!" "The surrender is cancelled." For a few terrifying hours, no one knew the truth. By dawn, loyal forces surrounded the rebels. Shots echoed across the courtyard. By 7 a.m., the coup was crushed. Major Hatanaka fled the palace on a motorcycle. Witnesses say he raced through the streets, shouting to soldiers, "The war is not over yet!" Moments later, he stopped near the palace gates, drew his pistol, and shot himself. In his pocket, they found a note. "I did it for the love of my country." Had Hatanaka succeeded? Had the record been destroyed or delayed? Japan's surrender would have been postponed. And by August 19th, the third bomb would have fallen. At noon on August 15, 1945, history stood still. For the first time, the Japanese people heard the voice of their emperor. Crackling through radios across the nation, his words were calm, poetic, and full of sorrow. He never used the word surrender. Instead, he said, "Why have decided to endure the unendurable and suffer what is insufferable?" For millions listening in silence, the meaning was clear. The war was over. Across the Pacific, President Truman finally exhaled. He had dreaded the thought of ordering another atomic strike. The third bomb, still in assembly at Los Alamos, was quietly disarmed. It never left American soil. But what if the coup had succeeded? What if Hirohito had been killed, or the record destroyed? If Japan had fought on, the third bomb would have been used, likely on Kokura, or perhaps Yokohama. Entire cities would have vanished in seconds. And as Soviet armies stormed from the north, Japan might have been divided like Germany, half under US control, half under Soviet occupation. Imagine a Japan split by ideology, a communist North Japan and a democratic South Japan. The Cold War could have begun not in Berlin, but in Tokyo. The Japan we know today. Peaceful, prosperous, a global leader in technology and culture. Might have never existed. Even after the surrender, the war didn't end instantly. Some soldiers refused to believe it. Scattered across the Pacific, on remote islands, men continued fighting, convinced the broadcasts were enemy lies. One Japanese soldier, Hiro Onoda, didn't surrender until 1974, nearly 30 years later. To him, the war had never ended. Meanwhile, the third bomb sat silently, a reminder of how close humanity came to annihilation. It was eventually dismantled after Japan's formal surrender on September 2, 1945, aboard the battleship USS Missouri. In just one summer, humanity had built a weapon capable of erasing entire cities, and we came within days of using it again. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and the one that never fell. That third bomb, never dropped, never detonated, remains the ghost of the atomic age. A silent symbol of a moment when the world balanced on the edge of extinction, a reminder that the smallest twist of fate, a few hours of chaos, a single hidden record, can decide the survival of millions. The war ended. The world rebuilt. But the lessons of that summer still echo today. In every nuclear test, every arms treaty, every siren that warns of war. Because history itself nearly ended in the ruins of Japan.